The gambling halls of Station Veridax had never seen such excitement. Creatures from 12 different species crowded around holographic displays, their various appendages clutching credit chips worth more than most planets. The Galactic Commerce Syndicate had opened a new betting pool, and this one promised to be the easiest money in centuries. The target was a small blue world called Earth. Counselor Bryn pushed through the crowd, her silver scales catching the artificial light. As the Syndicate's official observer, she had been assigned to document the upcoming conquest. It was supposed to be a simple job. Watch the primitive species fall. Record their surrender. Go home. The odds displayed on every screen told the story. Shortest collapse time, 4 hours. Longest estimate, 3 days. Not a single bettor in the entire galaxy believed humanity would last a week. The Dracal Dominion has never failed, announced a merchant with too many eyes. I am putting 50,000 credits on total surrender within 6 hours. Others laughed and raised their bets higher. The Dracal were known across the galaxy as efficient conquerors. They had crushed dozens of primitive worlds. Their military technology was centuries ahead of anything Earth possessed. Their soldiers were bred for war. Commander Goreth stood at the center of his flagship's bridge, watching the blue planet grow larger on the view screen. He was tall even for a Dracal, his gray skin covered in ritual scars from 100 victories. This conquest would be his easiest yet. Begin the invasion, he ordered. Midnight by their primary time zone. Hit 12 cities simultaneously. I want this finished before their sun rises twice. Bryn watched from her observation post as thousands of Dracal dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere. She activated her recording device. The Syndicate wanted every moment captured for their entertainment archives. Primitive species always provided such dramatic footage when they realized resistance was impossible. The first reports came back within minutes. Landing successful. Ground forces deployed. Advancing on primary targets. Then silence. Goreth frowned at his communication officer. Report. Commander, there appears to be interference. From what? They barely have satellite technology. The officer's face went pale. From weapons fire, Commander. Our forces are under attack. Bryn leaned forward in her seat. This was not in any of the projections. Primitive species were supposed to panic. They were supposed to run. They were supposed to surrender. Humans were doing none of these things. Footage began streaming to the flagship. Dracal soldiers pinned down in urban environments. Human vehicles ramming through barricades. Explosions lighting up the night sky. The primitive weapons were crude, yes, but they were everywhere. And the creatures wielding them showed no fear. This is impossible, Goreth muttered. They should be terrified. Bryn watched a feed showing a group of humans with simple projectile weapons ambushing a Dracal patrol. The humans moved with coordination that suggested training. Military training. These were not frightened civilians. These were soldiers. Commander, the communication officer reported, we have confirmed resistance in all 12 landing zones. Local military forces are engaging our troops across multiple continents. Then send reinforcements. Overwhelm them. Sir, that is not the concerning part. The officer swallowed hard. The civilians are also fighting. On the screens, Bryn saw what he meant. Farmers with hunting weapons firing from behind tractors. Shop owners throwing burning bottles at Dracal vehicles. Elderly humans directing younger ones to attack positions. Children carrying ammunition to fighters. The entire species was fighting back. By the third hour, something even stranger began happening. Human communication networks, which the Dracal had assumed they could easily jam, remained operational. The humans had built redundancies into their systems. When one network failed, another took its place. They were coordinating across their entire planet, sharing information about Dracal tactics and weaknesses in real time. Goreth ordered his ships to destroy their communication satellites. The humans simply switched to ground-based systems. When those were targeted, they used physical messengers. When roads were blocked, they used their primitive flying machines. They adapted faster than Dracal tactical computers could predict. By Hour 6, the first Dracal landing craft was captured intact. Bryn recorded every moment. The footage showed humans swarming the grounded ship, not to destroy it, but to study it. Within hours, their scientists were inside, taking apart every system, photographing every component. They were learning. Counselor Bryn, Gorath's voice came through her communicator. What is your assessment? She considered her words carefully. Commander, I believe the Syndicate's projections may require adjustment. How much adjustment? Bryn looked at her screens, at humans refusing to surrender, at farmers and soldiers fighting side by side, at scientists already reverse engineering technology that should have taken them centuries to understand. Significant adjustment, she said quietly. Back on Station Veridax, the gambling halls had grown silent. The holographic displays showed the same footage Bryn was recording. Creatures who had bet fortunes on humanity's quick defeat watched in disbelief as hour after hour passed without surrender. The first nervous questions about refund policies began circulating. But on Earth, as the sun rose on the first day of invasion, humanity was only getting started. They had survived the night. Now they intended to win the war. And somewhere in the chaos, a young sergeant named Danny led his squad through burning streets, captured Draco rifle in his hands, already planning his next ambush. The galaxy had bet against humanity. They were about to learn what a terrible mistake that was. Smoke rose from 100 cities across Earth, but the fires burning brightest were in the hearts of those who had expected easy victory. Commander Gorath had not slept in 36 hours. Every report brought worse news. Every tactical update showed his forces losing ground instead of gaining it. The holographic map of Earth in his command center should have been covered in Draco victory markers by now. Instead, it showed a nightmare of contested zones and failed advances. Explain this to me, he growled at his officers. We have orbital superiority. We have superior weapons. We have centuries of conquest experience. How are we losing to creatures who still use chemical propulsion? No one had an answer. On the surface, the humans continued doing the impossible. They learned. They adapted. They refused to behave like any conquered species in galactic history. Counselor Bryn observed a group of human engineers working on captured Draco equipment in an underground facility. They had stripped 3 landing craft down to their basic components in less than 2 days. Now, they were rebuilding, mixing their own primitive technology with Draco systems in ways that should not have worked. But they did work. A young engineer held up a device she had created. It was ugly. It looked like someone had welded together parts from a car engine and a Draco power cell. But when she activated it, the energy output exceeded anything the original Draco component could produce. How is this possible? Bryn asked her human liaison, a military officer who had been assigned to ensure her safety. The officer, a woman named Colonel Rivera, smiled. Because we do not build things the way we are supposed to. We build things the way we need them to work. This was the pattern Bryn saw everywhere. Humans did not follow rules. They did not accept limitations. When something was supposed to be impossible, they simply tried anyway until it worked. In the first week, they had figured out how to jam Draco communications using modified radio equipment. In the second week, they had created weapons that combined human explosives with Draco energy technology, producing devastating results. Now, in the third week, they were testing vehicles that merged combustion engines with Draco anti-gravity systems. The results were ugly, unstable, dangerous. They were also winning. Sergeant Danny, now promoted to lieutenant for his actions in the first night's fighting, led one of the most successful guerrilla units on the planet. His squad had destroyed 11 Draco-supplied depots using nothing but stolen weapons and local knowledge. The Draco could not understand how he kept finding their hidden bases. They did not realize that humans had been mapping their own planet for centuries. Every cave system, every abandoned mine, every forgotten tunnel was known to someone. And those people were sharing that knowledge freely. Old enemies became allies overnight. Nations that had been rivals for generations suddenly worked together without hesitation. Scientists who had competed for funding now shared discoveries instantly across global networks. Military officers who had trained to fight each other now coordinated their forces against a common enemy. The Drakel had never faced a species like this on Station Veridax. The gambling halls were in chaos. The betting pools had officially closed, citing unprecedented market conditions. In truth, the syndicate was facing financial collapse. Too many wealthy gamblers had bet too much money on humanity's quick defeat. Representatives from a dozen species demanded answers. They wanted their money back. They wanted someone to blame. They wanted to know how a primitive world had humiliated the greatest military in the sector. The syndicate had no answers to give. Gorith received orders from his government to resolve the situation immediately. They did not care how. They just wanted the embarrassment to end. He chose the most direct solution. If the ground war could not be won, he would end it from orbit. His ships carried enough firepower to sterilize the planet's surface. It was considered wasteful to destroy a habitable world, but the Drakel had done it before when conquest proved too difficult. Target their major population centers, he ordered. Begin bombardment in 6 hours. But Commander Gorith had made a critical error. He had announced his intentions on a communication channel that human hackers had already compromised. Within minutes, every military commander on Earth knew the bombardment was coming. Within hours, they had formulated a response. Lieutenant Danny volunteered for the mission immediately. It was insane, suicidal, exactly the kind of thing humans did when they had no other choice. They were going to board the Drakel flagship. The plan used every scrap of capture technology they had. Modified shuttles that could evade Drakel sensors. Breaching equipment built from hybrid components. Weapons designed to work in the close quarters of ship corridors. .20 soldiers. One ship. The fate of a planet. Danny's shuttle launched toward the Drakel fleet. Bryn watched from her observation post with growing unease. She had seen many species fight against conquest. She had never seen one fight like this. What are you thinking? Colonel Rivera asked through a private channel. The human officer had become something like a friend over the past weeks. Bryn considered her answer carefully. I am thinking that the syndicate made a very expensive mistake. Above Earth, the Drakel fleet prepared for bombardment, unaware that humanity's response was already on its way. The shuttle cut through the void between Earth and the Drakel fleet, its stolen engines burning silently in the darkness of space. Inside, 20 humans checked their weapons for the 100th time. They all knew the odds. Most of them would not survive the next hour. Lieutenant Danny looked at his team. Soldiers from 7 different nations sat together in the cramped shuttle. A month ago, some of them had been trained to fight each other. Now, they moved as one unit, their differences forgotten in the face of extinction. 60 seconds to contact, the pilot announced. They still have not detected us. The hybrid stealth system was working. Human engineers had combined Drakel sensor-dampening technology with their own radar-absorbing materials. The result was imperfect, flickering, barely held together with welded patches and desperate engineering. The IT was also invisible to the Drakel fleet. The flagship loomed ahead, massive and terrible. Its weapons arrays were already warming up for the bombardment that would end human civilization. Somewhere on that ship, Commander Gorith was preparing to commit genocide. He would never get the chance. The shuttle attached to the flagship's hull with a sound that echoed through the small craft. Breaching charges activated. The metal screamed as it was cut away. Then 20 humans poured into the corridor beyond, weapons blazing. The Drakel were completely unprepared. Their security protocols assumed no primitive species could reach their ships. They had guards, yes, but not enough. Not nearly enough for what came through that breach. Danny moved through the corridors with savage efficiency. The captured Drakel rifle felt natural in his hands now. He had killed dozens of invaders with it over the past weeks. He intended to kill many more. Bridge is 4 levels up, he called his team. Move fast. We do not have time for careful. They did not move carefully. They moved like humans always moved when their homes were threatened. They moved with fury and desperation, an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Alarms screamed through the ship. Drakel soldiers rushed to respond. But the humans had surprise and momentum, and they used both with brutal effectiveness. Colonel Rivera watched the mission from Earth's command center, her hands gripping the console as reports came in. The team was taking casualties. 3 dead in the first 5 minutes. 2 more wounded badly enough to slow them down. But they kept moving. They always kept moving. Counselor Bryn monitored everything from her observation post. Her recording devices captured every moment of the assault. The Syndicate would want this footage, though not for the reasons they had originally intended. They're actually doing it, she whispered to herself. They're actually taking the ship. Commander Gorith realized what was happening too late. By the time he ordered his personal guards to the bridge, the humans were already outside the door. By the time those guards took position, the door was exploding inward. Danny came through first. He shot 2 Draco before his feet touched the ground. The rest of his team followed, spreading out, covering angles, eliminating threats with practiced precision. Gorith reached for his sidearm. A human bullet took his hand off at the wrist. That was for Seoul, Danny said, advancing on the wounded commander. For Mumbai. For Cairo. For every city you burned. The surviving Draco Bridge crew surrendered. They had no choice. The humans controlled their ship. Danny stood over Gorith, weapon pointed at the commander's head. It would be so easy, so satisfying. One pull of the trigger, and the architect of humanity's near destruction would be dead. Do it, Gorith snarled. You have 1-0. Kill me, and my fleet will glass your planet in revenge. Danny smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Your fleet is going to do exactly what we tell them. Because we now control this ship. And this ship controls the fleet override codes. Gorith's eyes widened. The humans should not have known about those codes. They should not have understood Draco command structure well enough to know such codes even existed. But they had learned. In 6 weeks, they had learned more about Draco technology and society than any conquered species had learned in centuries. Attention all Draco vessels, Danny announced through the flagship's communication system. This is Lieutenant Danny of Earth's United Defense Force. We have captured your flagship and your commander. You will power down your weapons immediately. Any ship that refuses will be destroyed by your own command vessel. Silence filled the communication channels. Then, one by one, the Draco ships began powering down their weapons, and on Earth, the bombardment countdown stopped. In the command center, Colonel Rivera collapsed in her chair and allowed herself to breathe for the first time in hours on Station Veridax. Creatures who had bet on humanity's destruction watched their screens in stunned silence. The primitives had not only survived, they had captured an entire invasion fleet. Bryn activated her priority channel to the Syndicate. Her message was brief. Adjust all future projections regarding humanity. Significantly. But as Danny secured the Draco Bridge and began the long process of turning an invasion fleet into a captured prize, he knew this was not the end, that IT was barely the beginning. Humanity had survived the first battle. Now, they intended to make sure no one ever threatened their world again. And that meant finding the creatures who had bet on their extinction. 3 months had passed since the night the Draco came to conquer Earth. The scars remained visible from orbit. Burned cities, cratered landscapes, mass graves that stretched for kilometers. But humanity had not spent those 3 months mourning. They had spent them building. The captured Draco fleet now orbited Earth like a protective shell. Human engineers had crawled through every ship, learning every system, improving every design. What had once been weapons of conquest were now weapons of defense. And they were just the beginning. Lieutenant Danny, now promoted to commander for his actions on the flagship, stood before the United Earth Council. The organization had not existed 6 months ago. Now it represented every nation on the planet, united by the shared experience of nearly being wiped out. We have confirmed the location of the Galactic Commerce Syndicate, Danny reported. Station Veridax, approximately 40 light-years from Earth. Our captured navigation databases contain complete route information. The council chamber was silent. Everyone understood what he was really saying. They could reach the creatures who had bet on human extinction. They could find the gambling halls where fortunes had been wagered on their deaths. What do you propose? Asked the council chairman, a weathered diplomat who had spent the invasion coordinating global resistance from an underground bunker. That Danny's expression was calm, but his eyes held something dangerous. I propose we go collect what we are owed. The debate lasted 3 days. Some argued for isolation. Earth had survived. Why risk everything by venturing into a hostile galaxy? Others demanded immediate military action. The Syndicate had treated human lives as entertainment. They deserved destruction to in the end. Humanity chose a third path. They would not hide. They would not destroy. They would do something far more terrifying to creatures who had built their power on wealth and commerce. They would collect their debts. Counselor Bryn had formally defected to humanity's side 2 months after the invasion's failure. She was not alone. Dozens of alien observers, diplomats, and merchants had chosen to remain on Earth rather than return to face the Syndicate's wrath for their failed predictions. Now she served as humanity's primary advisor on galactic politics. You must understand, she explained to the Council. The Syndicate operates on contracts. Everything they do is bound by legal agreements. When they opened betting pools on your extinction, they created binding financial instruments. So they owe us money, Colonel Rivera asked. She had been promoted as well, now serving as the Council's military liaison. They owe you everything, Bryn replied. Every credit wagered against your survival is now a debt owed to your species. The total amount is substantial. The number she provided made the Council members go pale. Trillions of galactic credits. Enough to buy planets. Enough to build empires. Enough to make humanity a power that could never be threatened again. The fleet launched 6 months after the invasion's end. 12 captured Draco warships, now modified with human improvements that made them faster and more powerful than anything the original designers had imagined. Human crews operated systems that should have taken decades to learn. But humans had never been good at following timelines. Commander Danny led the expedition from the captured flagship, now renamed Defiance. Bryn stood beside him as an advisor and translator. Colonel Rivera commanded the ground forces that would accompany them. The journey to Station Veridax took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of humans learning to operate in space. 3 weeks of training for scenarios they had never imagined. 3 weeks of preparing to meet the creatures who had gambled on their deaths. When a human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, the station's sensors went into immediate panic. Alarms screamed through every corridor. The Syndicate's defense forces scrambled to respond. But they were too slow. The human fleet had already taken position around the station, weapons trained on every critical system. Danny's voice broadcast through every speaker on Veridax. This is Commander Danny of the Earth Defense Fleet. We are here to collect the debts owed to humanity. You have wagered against our survival. We survived. Now you will pay. Chaos erupted in the gambling halls. Creatures who had bet fortunes on human extinction scrambled to flee. Security forces attempted to mount a defense. Syndicate leaders screamed demands and threats. None of it mattered. Humanity had come to collect, and they were not leaving until every debt was paid. Bryn watched the panic on the station's communication channels with grim satisfaction. She had warned the Syndicate. She had told them the humans were different. They had not listened. Now they would learn. Commander Gorath, still a prisoner aboard the Defiance, watched the chaos from his cell with something approaching respect. They actually came, he muttered. They actually tracked down the Syndicate. The guard outside his cell, a young soldier who had lost family in the invasion, nodded. We always collect what we are owed. You should remember that. Gorath said nothing. He was beginning to understand that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake in targeting Earth, and humanity was only getting started. The Syndicate's council chamber had been designed to intimidate. Massive columns rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. The floor was polished stone quarried from a dead world. Representatives from 12 species sat in elevated positions, looking down on any creature who dared address them. For centuries, this room had witnessed the surrender of primitive worlds. Conquered species had knelt on that polished floor and begged for mercy. Today, Commander Danny walked across it with his head held high. The Syndicate representatives stared down at him with expressions ranging from outrage to barely concealed terror. The human fleet still surrounded their station. Human soldiers controlled every docking bay. Their precious gambling halls had been sealed and their financial systems frozen. This is an act of war, declared High Merchant Torval, a creature with scales like tarnished gold and too many teeth. You primitives have attacked a neutral commercial station. Danny smiled. It was the same smile he had worn when he captured the Draco flagship. Neutral? You opened betting pools on our extinction. You profited from our planned deaths. You called it entertainment. Commerce is not war. Another representative protested. We merely facilitated financial transactions. Then consider this a financial transaction. Danny activated a holographic display. Numbers scrolled across the air, each one representing a bet placed against humanity's survival. According to your own laws, every wager against a species that survives becomes a debt owed to that species. We have survived. You owe us. The chamber erupted in protest. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding that the humans be removed, imprisoned, executed. Security forces that no longer answered to the syndicate did nothing. Counselor Bryn stepped forward. She had spent months studying galactic commercial law, preparing for exactly this moment. High Merchant, your own charter clearly states that failed conquest wagers must be paid in full to the surviving species. I have documented every bet placed against Earth. The total debt is 400 trillion galactic credits. Silence fell over the chamber. It was more money than some entire civilizations possessed. Impossible, Torvali said. We cannot pay such an amount. You would bankrupt us. Then consider alternative payment. Danny's voice was cold. Technology transfers, territory concessions, political recognition. We have prepared a list of acceptable terms. Colonel Rivera handed him a data tablet. The terms have been negotiated over weeks, refined by lawyers and diplomats from every nation on Earth. They were harsh. They were comprehensive. They were exactly what the syndicate deserved. Full disclosure of all galactic technology currently restricted from developing worlds, Danny read. Immediate recognition of Earth as a sovereign galactic power. Permanent seat on a galactic council with full voting rights. Transfer of all Draco invasion fleet ships and associated technology as war reparations. This is extortion, a representative sputtered. This is consequences, Danny replied. You bet against us. You lost. Now you pay. The negotiations lasted 12 hours. The syndicate representatives argued, threatened, pleaded, and finally accepted. They had no choice. Human ships controlled their station. Human soldiers secured their assets. Human hackers had already penetrated their financial systems. Humanity was not asking. Humanity was collecting. Commander Gorath was brought before the council as a final piece of business. The Draco commander stood in chains, his missing hand now replaced with a crude prosthetic. He had watched his entire invasion become a humiliating defeat. He had watched the species he had tried to exterminate become a galactic power. The Draco Dominion has authorized me to speak on their behalf, Torval announced reluctantly. They wish to negotiate a separate peace with Earth. Danny studied the commander who had ordered the deaths of millions. The Draco sent this fleet to destroy us. They burned our cities. They killed our families. And now they want peace. They want to avoid your revenge, Gorath said quietly. It was the first time he had spoken directly to his captor since the flagship's capture. They have seen what you did to the syndicate in one day. They do not wish to see what you would do to them with more time. It was not an apology. Danny did not expect one, but it was acknowledgement. The galaxy's greatest military power had learned to fear humanity. Peace terms will be negotiated separately, Danny decided. The Draco will provide full technological cooperation. They will pay reparations for every life lost, and they will never threaten Earth again. Gorath nodded slowly. Agreed. On behalf of my government, agreed. The treaties were signed before the human fleet departed. The Galactic Commerce Syndicate, once the most powerful commercial entity in known space, had been humbled. Their gambling operations were now regulated. Their political influence had been shattered. Their arrogance had cost them everything. A.S. the Defiance prepared to leave Station Veridax. Bryn joined Danny on the observation deck. The stars stretched out before them. Countless points of light representing countless worlds that now knew humanity's name. You could have destroyed them, she said quietly. You had the power. No one would have stopped you. Danny watched the stars for a long moment before answering. Destruction is easy. Survival is harder. We chose survival. And now? What does humanity choose now? Danny smiled, and this time it held no threat, just determination. Now we go home. We rebuild. We grow stronger. And we make sure no one ever bets against us again. The fleet turned toward Earth, carrying the spoils of humanity's first galactic victory. But the galaxy was watching, and they were learning a lesson they would never forget. 1 year after the invasion, Earth had transformed beyond recognition. Cities rose from the ashes, rebuilt with hybrid technology that merged human determination with galactic engineering. Shipyards that had once built ocean vessels now constructed vessels capable of crossing stars. Universities that had taught theoretical physics now trained engineers in technologies that had been science fiction just 12 months earlier. And on every corner of the planet, monuments stood to those who had fallen. Humanity would never forget the price of survival. Commander Danny stood at the center of the new Galactic Council chamber, built on neutral ground in a space station halfway between Earth and the Syndicate's territories. Representatives from 32 species filled the tiered seating around him. Some watched with curiosity, others with fear, a few with grudging respect. This was humanity's first formal address to the galactic community as a recognized power. 1 year ago, Danny began, the Dracal Dominion invaded our world. The Galactic Commerce Syndicate opened betting pools on our extinction. Every species in this chamber either wagered against us, watched in entertainment, or did nothing while we died. The silence in the chamber was absolute. We survived, not because we were stronger or smarter or more advanced. We survived because we refused to accept defeat. We survived because every human on our planet chose to fight. We survived because that is what humans do. Counselor Bryn sat in the Earth delegation section, watching her adopted species claim their place among the stars. She had seen many things in her centuries of observing primitive worlds. She had never seen anything like humanity's rise. We come before this council not as conquerors, Danny continued. We could have destroyed the Syndicate. We could have burned Dracal worlds in revenge. We chose not to. We chose to build instead of destroy, to trade instead of war, to join this community of species rather than tear it apart. High Merchant Torval shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The Syndicate had been forced to accept human observers in their operations. Their gambling enterprises were now regulated. Their influence had crumbled, all because they had bet on the wrong species. But understand this clearly. Danny's voice hardened. We will never again be prey. We will never again be entertainment. We will never again be victims. Anyone who threatens Earth will face the full power of a species that has learned to fight. And we never forget those who bet against us. The message was clear. Humanity wanted peace. Humanity would work for cooperation. But humanity would never be helpless again. The vote to grant Earth full council membership passed unanimously. No species dared oppose it. The humans had demonstrated what happened to those who underestimated them. After the formal session ended, Bryn found Danny on the observation deck overlooking the assembled fleet. Human ships now flew alongside vessels from a dozen allied species. It was a sight that would have been impossible to imagine 1 year ago. You have achieved something remarkable, she said. Your species went from unknown primitives to galactic power in 12 months. The history books will remember this year for millennia. Danny watched the ships moving in formation, so many of them crewed by humans who had never imagined leaving their planet. We did not want any of this. We would have been happy staying on our little world, arguing with each other about borders and resources and politics. The Dracal forced us to become something else. Do you regret it? He considered the question seriously. I regret the millions who died. I regret the cities we lost. I regret that my children will grow up in a galaxy that tried to kill them before they were born. He paused, but I do not regret who we became. When the choice was extinction or evolution, we evolved. Colonel Rivera joined them on the observation deck. She had been promoted again, now serving as the commander of Earth's expeditionary forces. The council session went well. We have received 17 formal alliance requests and 43 trade proposals. Everyone wants to be friends now, Danny said with a dry smile. Can you blame them? They have seen what happens to those who oppose us. Bryn watched the two humans discuss their species' future with the casual confidence of creatures who had stared extinction in the face and won. She had studied hundreds of civilizations throughout her career. None of them had recovered from near destruction so quickly. None of them had turned defeat into dominance so completely. There's a saying spreading through the galaxy, she mentioned. I thought you should know. What saying? Never bet against the humans. They always collect. Danny laughed. It was a genuine sound, free of the tension that had marked his voice throughout the invasion and its aftermath. For a moment, he was not a commander or a diplomat or a symbol of human defiance. He was just a man who had survived something terrible and somehow found a way to smile about it. That is a good saying, he admitted. Make sure everyone remembers it. The fleet began moving, preparing to escort the Earth delegation home. Behind them, the council chamber buzzed with diplomats and merchants and representatives, all suddenly very interested in forming positive relationships with humanity. The gambling halls of the galaxy had learned an expensive lesson. Earth was not a primitive world to be conquered and forgotten. Earth was a species that remembered its enemies and rewarded its friends. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, new species were learning the most important rule of galactic survival. Never bet against the humans. They always collect.